What is domestic violence and what does it include?
Domestic violence. There are technical answers to that, and there are common sense answers to that. And a lot of stuff can be put under what is domestic violence. To me, it's any act of aggression, whether it be verbal or physical, between two partners, whether they are same sex, heterosexual, whatever. And it can also be among family members as well. And I think people sort of lose track of that, whether it's father, son, mother, child, sister, brother, sister, sister, but most commonly you think of acts of aggression between either spouses or people that have been in a romantic relationship or in a romantic relationship with each other. And some of those can be physical, but a lot of those are verbal.
Welcome to another episode of Best of Johnston County, brought to you by Breeden Law Office. Our host, Jonathan Breeden, an experienced family lawyer with a deep connection to the community, is ready to take you on a journey through the area that he has called home for over 20 years. Whether it's a deep dive into the love locals have for the county or unraveling the complexities of family law, Best of Johnston County presents an authentic slice of this unique community.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Best of Johnston County podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden, and today we have a special edition episode of the Best of Johnston County podcast that we call Ask Jonathan Breeden Anything, where I will answer questions from our social media coordinator, Raina Birch, about some type of family law. I do not really know what the questions are very often, but I probably know the answers, having practiced family law for around 24 years here in Johnston County. Our normal episodes is where I, Jonathan Breeden, interview local community leaders, business owners, and interesting people in Johnston County about what they love about Johnston County. Episodes of the Best of Johnston County podcast come out every Monday. So this is a special edition episode of our podcast called Ask Jonathan Breeden Anything. You ready to go, Breda?
I'm ready. You ready?
All right, I'm ready.
All right. So we've got a theme today. Let's see if you can guess what it is. First question. What is domestic violence and what does it include?
Domestic violence. There are technical answers to that, and there are common sense answers to that. And a lot of stuff can be put under what is domestic violence. To me, it's any act of aggression, whether it be verbal or physical, between two partners, whether they are same sex, heterosexual, whatever. And it can also be among family members as well. And I think people sort of lose track of that, whether it's father, son, mother, child, sister, brother, sister, sister. But most commonly you think of acts of aggression between either spouses or people that have been in a romantic relationship or in a romantic relationship with each other. And some of those can be physical, but a lot of those are verbal. And I think the verbal ones can do more damage than the physical acts of aggression between people, because I think what we've seen over the years here at the Breeden Law Office is people don't recognize that the verbal taunts, the verbal insults are actually a form of domestic violence. But they recognize if somebody actually were to hit them, hold them down, choke them, that's domestic violence. But what they don't understand is the verbal is also domestic violence, saying you're fat or you're ugly or unattractive or you're stupid or
using it as a means to control.
Right, as a means of control. And I think a lot of people come in here and they're like, well, I'm not a victim of domestic violence because I've never been hit. And then describe for us verbal abuse that is just awful, but you are. It's just not physical, but it's still damaging. It's still not good. It's still punishable under North Carolina law. And I think that's one thing that people lose track of, is that in my mind, it's any act. And I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's taking your car keys to where you can't leave. I don't care if it's verbal abuse of you or physical abuse of you. All of it is domestic violence, and all of it has really no place in our society, and all of which is extremely damaging to both people involved, the person, the victim of it, and the perpetrator.
Yes. I mean, it could be, like you said, physical, mental, emotional, financial, all sorts.
Correct. You cut somebody off from the credit cards, don't have their name on the bank account, they're given $50 a week to buy groceries. Yeah, we've seen it all over the years, and it's not good. And the thing is, we live in a very diverse area here. And so we have represented people from all over the world, all different types of races, all different types of religions, all different income levels, all different. You do this 24 years, you see a lot of everything. And domestic violence is the same.
Yeah.
It's got the same characteristics, regardless of income, regardless of race, regardless of religion. It's all the same. And it usually has to do with trying to gain control over another human being to where they feel like they don't have the free choice that we're all entitled to.
Yeah. All right. Number 2, how does domestic violence impact child custody?
Domestic violence is really bad for the people in it, and it's even worse on the children who do not understand what is going on. They do not have the ability to process as adults what is going on. They tend to internalize what they're seeing, and they also tend to learn that this is how things are. And so the worst part about domestic violence for children is that a young girl seeing her mother be hit and verbally abused believes that's what is normal, and they often will become a victim when they become an adult or a teenager, because that is what they see as normal because their mother was physically abused, verbally abused. Same thing for boys. If they see a father verbally abusing or physically abusing their mother or their current girlfriend of the week or whatever, they're going to learn that is how men treat women, and are going to often repeat that as they become teenagers and adults. And the number of people that come in here that are victims of domestic violence and that are perpetrators of domestic violence, that when we start asking questions, the overwhelming majority were witnesses to it in their childhood. And they may not have known it, particularly if it was only verbal. Back to the first question you asked, Raina, that it's, and because
It's not okay.
It's not okay, but that's what you learn. They don't know that, right? Because the people they looked up to and mimicked and respected the most, that's what they did. And so that's the thing. And so when it comes to custody, if there's been domestic violence and the children are aware of it or witnessed it or whatever, the perpetrator of that domestic violence is going to be limited in their ability to be able to parent their children, because the court will believe, okay, well, this relationship's over. But the odds are that perpetrator, if they don't go and get some mental health counseling, some domestic violence counseling, some anger management counseling, they're going to repeat it with whoever they happen to be dating or married to at the time. And that child is going to see it again. And the judge knows that. And so if the judges are going to give that perpetrator less time and less ability to parent their child to try to protect the child from future acts of domestic violence, that the court is almost assuredly is going to happen if this perpetrator cannot come into the show to this court how that they have taken steps to be better through maybe the DOSE program in Wake County. That's a 26-week anger management domestic violence course. They have HALT in Johnston County. They also have a program in Harnett County where people that have perpetrated domestic violence, both verbal and physical, can go to a 26-week course that has a 6-month follow-up where they can learn how to be better and how not to react in these situations. But the same thing when you talk to, and it's often, and domestic violence goes both ways. And we've seen a lot of men that are victims of domestic violence from verbal abuse from women, not as much physical abuse on men from women. We've seen that some, but we've seen a lot of men who've been verbally abused by women. But the majority of the time, it's a man verbally or physically abusing a woman. And oftentimes when the victims come in and they're like, well, he never hit me, so I'm not a victim of domestic violence, the perpetrators will often say, I'm not a batterer because I never hit her. But we're like, look at these texts you sent. These texts are horrible. Like, they're horrible. They're not good. They're not positive. No. And I'm asking, like, and the thing you have to ask yourself is, what I'm saying to my spouse or the mother of my children or to a family member about, is it in the best interest of the child that I say this? Is it going to make the child's life better for me to say these things? And the answer is no. But you say them because you can't control yourself and you're mad. And what matters the most at that point is that you're mad and you're going to tell them about it. That is pointless. but that's what ends up happening. But they don't recognize that the verbal abuse is battery and that these texts are going to be seen by the judge and it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
But now the other thing is, we just talked about, the judges are also aware that if you're a victim of domestic violence, the overwhelming odds are you're going to be a victim again. And while you may not be with this particular spouse or boyfriend that you have a child with, if you as a victim of domestic violence don't go get help, then the odds are the next relationship you're going to be in is going to be with somebody who's the same, who is also a batter, who's also verbally abusive. So if you're a victim of that, you need to go get your own help, whether it's through Interact in Wake County, whether it's through Safe House in Harnett and Lee counties, whether it's through Harbor House in Johnson County. All of these places have free 24-hour shelters. They have free 24-hour hotlines that you can call. They have free classes that you can go and take on Tuesday and Wednesday nights about how to get out of these situations, how to avoid being in these situations.
Spotting red flags ahead of time.
Spot the red flags ahead of time. And we'll probably have to do a podcast in the future on the red flags of batterers, because there are tons of them. And it often focuses on, they're showing you a lot of attention, which you really like because you like that person, but the attention is part of starting to gain control from the beginning. We don't have time to get into that today, but it does affect, it affects child custody. And here's the thing. I have been in DSS court where children have been placed in foster care, I don't know how many times, because of just domestic violence, to where the parents cannot stop domestic. Even if they break up, the mom gets in another relationship with a person and there's domestic violence and the court needs to take the children out of the home, or the dad or the mom stay together and the domestic violence continues and the court has to come in and the Department of Social Services and remove the children out of the home so that they're not witnessing this anymore. Tons and tons of times, Raina. In the courts in Johnson County DSS, Wake County DSS, Harnett County DSS, they're not going to allow it. If they become aware that there's domestic violence going on, even if the parents don't want to do anything about it and it's affecting these children, that's considered abuse and neglect in North Carolina, and they will remove the children from the court and put them in foster care or put them with a family member where they're not experiencing domestic violence on a daily basis or whatever, to be in a safer situation. So I think if you're in that situation now, there's tons of resources to get out. Interact, Harbor, Safe House. There's all those things. If you find that you cannot control your emotions and you can't hold your tongue and you cannot send that text, there's tons of help out there for you through the DOSE program, the HALT program, all these programs around the state. They're either low cost or free, and you need to do it because you need to be better. You need to be better for your kids and be better for everybody else in your life.
And your next partner.
Correct. And your next partner. Correct.
And I think a lot of people don't realize you don't have to, in order to be a victim of domestic violence, it doesn't mean it has to happen to you. It could just be you witnessing it.
Correct.
Repeated. Like that also makes you a victim of domestic violence, because especially as kids, when they feel like they can't do anything and they feel helpless. So I'm with you on all of that for sure. All right, next one. 3, what protections are available for victims of domestic violence?
The most common protection for the victim of domestic violence is to go get what is called a 50B North Carolina Domestic Violence Protective Order. And they're called 50Bs because they're under North Carolina General Statute 50B. And that is the most common, the easiest to obtain, and the most immediate protection that a victim of domestic violence can get. You can go to the courthouse during the day, every day that the courts are open, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., and you can apply for a domestic violence protective order. If you go with the programs that we've talked about, Harbor in Johnson County, Safe House in Harnett and Lee counties, Interact in Wake County, they actually have court advocates who help you fill out the paperwork and help you get in front of the judge and explain to your situation. And the court can give you, a judge can give you an immediate restraining order. If it happens to be on a weekend or overnight or on a holiday when the courts are closed, you can go to your local magistrate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The magistrates never close, and they can give you a 50B restraining order as well. So there's no reason that you cannot go get one at any point that you need one. And it'll be immediate. It's ex parte, based on what you say. The other side is not giving any notice of that. And then that order is good for up to 10 days. And within that 10-day period, the court will give you a court date, and you will come back and you will have a hearing in front of a judge. The other side will be served. You have the right to have a lawyer. If you're the victim, the other side has the right to hire a lawyer to defend their case. And there will be a trial in front of a judge where you will present your case as to why you believe that you qualify for a domestic violence protective order. There has to be a familiar relationship or a sexual relationship between you and the person who's perpetrating it that is either current or in the past. And you also have to have some act of domestic violence, which does not have to be physical. It can be verbal. And the verbal attacks have to rise to the level of substantial emotional distress, which basically causes you to be physically ill, which we see all the time, from stomach aches to throwing up, panic attacks, can't sleep, OCD tendencies. All of that are outward signs of verbal abuse that can lead to being able to get a domestic violence protective order. And then, of course, the physical acts as well. But there's also the verbal abuse that if the other side threatens to commit suicide. That is a very common thing.
Yes.
If you leave me, I will kill myself. That is grounds for domestic violence protective order as well. And I don't think people realize that as well. So if you've been a victim of any of this, if any of this has happened to you and you feel like you need protection, the court can grant the 10-day protective order. And then after a trial, 10 days later, or if it gets continued, a month or two later, but the original protective order will stay in effect until there is a trial, the court can grant you a protective order for up to 1 year. And these protective orders can prevent the other side from being able to have contact with you, coming around where you are, keep them from coming to where you go to work, where your kids go to school, from coming to where you go to the doctor, come within 100 yards of you, not being able to communicate with you, can order that any custody exchanges may have to take place at a police department where it's being supervised by a police officer, can grant you possession of your home and kick the other person out of the home, can grant you possession of vehicles, can award you temporary post-separation support and possibly temporary child support. All of these things can be done with protective order, give you possession of your animals. And these protective orders can be good for up to a year. Now, they are temporary type orders. And so at some point, after you get the restraining order or whatever, you're going to need to go to regular custody court, and you're going to need to go to regular alimony court, and you'll need to go to regular property distribution court under the regular domestic courts to deal with these things on a more permanent basis. But a protective order can deal with everything in a short-term basis, sort of as a Band-Aid to give you immediate protection and help you for a few months until you can get into these regular courts and have regular domestic type hearings as far as that's concerned. As we talked about earlier, Interact, Safe House in Hunter County, Interact in Wake County, Harbor House in Johnston County, all have 24-hour domestic violence shelters that you can go to with your children that are safe and secure, and the perpetrator will not know where you are, and they can help you get into those. They also can provide you job counseling, help you find a job. They can help you obtain a vehicle. They have tons of services to be able to help you get back on your feet, along with these domestic violence classes that they offer for how to get out of domestic violence situation, how to stay out of domestic violence situation. They just have tons and tons of resources that are out there for you, as well as there are tons of websites. There's national domestic violence hotlines that can also help as well. So there are things. And of course, once you separate, if you go to a shelter and the other side's not giving you money, you could then qualify for food stamps and Medicaid for your children. And all of those things can be made available to you. And these groups can help you get those and help you navigate those. And you can, of course, call an attorney, like the attorneys here at the Breeden Law Office. We represent people in domestic violence situations every day, and we can help you, guide you through this process as well, and represent you in court.
Have family law questions? Need guidance to navigate legal challenges? The compassionate team at Breeden Law Office is here to help. Visit us at www.breedenfirm.com for practical advice, resources, or to book a consultation. Remember, when life gets messy, you don't have to face it alone.
All right, number 4, what are the potential legal consequences for domestic violence charges?
It depends, right? Because when you say legal consequences, you've got a very broad scope there. So domestic violence can be criminal and it can be civil. So these restraining orders we're talking about are civil. Nobody's going to jail because somebody gets a restraining order. But if you violate a restraining order, that's one misdemeanor in North Carolina, punishable by 5 months in prison. And if I assault you in some way, whether if I swing at you and miss, that's an assault. If I placed you in fear of sort of an unwanted touching, if I swing and miss, or I pull a gun, but I don't point it at you, that's an assault. If I hit you, that's an assault. Yep. If I strangle you, that's an assault. All of these are crimes, okay? If I threaten to kill you, that's a crime of communicating a threat. If you have a reasonable belief that I'm going to carry that out. If I call you 100 times in 3 hours, that is for the purposes of harassing you. Yes. That's a crime of harassing phone calls. If I keep coming around where you are and calling and texting, I can be stalking. Stalking is a crime. So there are a lot of crimes that are domestic violence, and they have the most severe penalties of any misdemeanors there are. And some of these are felonies, including any kind of assault by strangulation. If you put hands around your neck, if there are any marks on your neck or whatever, that's a felony. If you sustain serious injury from assaulting you, whether I hit you, beat you, stomp on you, body slam you, stab you, all of those types of situations, those are crimes, and you can easily go to jail. And we see people go to jail every single week for some type of criminal domestic violence. Civilly, you can lose the ability to go to your home. You can lose your ability. And of course, if you commit a crime and it's got domestic violence, you're not going to have a weapon. These restraining orders can also civilly keep you from being able to own a gun, possess a gun. And a lot of people like to hunt. You won't be able to do that anymore. It will keep you from being able to go to your home. It can divest you of a car that maybe you paid for because the court gave the car to the other side because they needed a vehicle. You can lose pretty much everything. You can be ordered to pay large sums of money and child support, and alimony, and post-separation support, and financially really make your life a lot harder. That's civilly, but it's going to change your life a lot. And it's going to limit where you can go. One of the great freedoms we have in America is the freedom of movement, the freedom of air travel, the freedom to go around. These restraining orders can say where you can and can't go. And that's not good. No. Including your children's school, including your children's ball games. The things you start to take for granted as a parent, all of a sudden you can't do because you can't be around the other parent because it's not safe. Yeah. So there are a lot of consequences financially, possibly your freedom of movement by going to prison, freedom of movement on places you can go, your ability to defend yourself because you won't be able to own a weapon or possess a weapon. I mean, the consequences are substantial. Yeah. And they can be substantial on a first offense as well. It's not one of these 3 strikes, you're out kind of things. No. It can be substantial on the first offense. And oftentimes it takes, they say on average of 6 acts of domestic violence before a victim actually does anything. And the courts and the judges know this. So when somebody comes in and they're like, okay,
it's the first time you're saying something.
Your first time you're saying something.
First time it's happened.
Correct. It's not going to be the first time it happened. They're going to know that, and they're going to act accordingly in deciding whether to grant these restraining orders or not. Yeah. Now, there are a lot of people that go and get restraining orders, unfortunately, where it's not quite enough, or they're using it for leverage and custody action as well. Yeah. And so that's where that 10-day hearing is so important, because I can go in there and say whatever I want about you, Raina, and as long as I'm swearing that it's true, and it may not be true, they're going to give me that 10-day order. The good thing is it's only 10 days, and you're going to be able to come back in there and bring an attorney with you and bring the evidence and be able to have a trial and defend yourself against what could be false allegations and get this restraining order thrown out because these allegations were not true. Yeah. So that's the other part. Unfortunately, there are people who go and make false claims of domestic violence. Usually I see that to get some sort of upper hand in a custody battle, or to try to get their spouse or boyfriend out of the home because they moved on to another relationship and they don't want to move. Yeah. I'm not saying that we see that every day, but we do see that more frequently than we would like, because these domestic violence protective orders are needed. I'm glad we have them. They're some of the most difficult things we have to do, whether we're representing the perpetrator or representing the victim of domestic violence or the accused. They may not even have done it, you know what I mean? Because we don't want this, particularly if they didn't do it, we don't want it following them. We don't want it on the record. We don't want their civil rights and their civil liberties to be taken away from them. based on false allegations. So we
Yeah.
work really hard to try to defend people that have been falsely accused of domestic violence. And we work really hard to defend people who have been rightly accused of domestic violence, to try to limit the consequences as much as possible, get them into some of these programs we talked about earlier so that maybe they will be better and it will act better moving forward into the future, so they're able to maintain a reasonable relationship with their children as well. So it's not the end of the world either way if you're a victim or if you may have done something that you regret, but you do need to get help. You do need to seek the resources that are in the community. You do need to talk to attorneys, family law attorneys, like the attorneys here at the Breeden Law Office, to find out what your rights are, to find out what the resources in the community are, and that kind of stuff, so that you can be better, so you can get back to being the hero of your life story, which is what we're trying to help everybody do that comes in to meet with us here at the Breeden Law Office.
Yep. And I mean, any system out there, no matter what system it is, you're always going to have those few people that try to abuse the system. But for the most part, I think it helps more than it hurts.
Correct. It definitely helps more than it hurts. And the thing we've seen with domestic violence, and people listening, if you'll pay attention on the news, when you hear about these domestic violence murders, which happen all the time, sadly.
Way too often.
Right. The majority of the time, the murders and the real serious assaults take place after the victim has left the relationship, and the other side, it feels like they're losing control and they're not going to get them back. And then they sort of overreact and they can't imagine living without them. And then they kill them. And then they often will kill themselves as a result, because now they've killed them. They can't live without them. They can't bring it back. They don't want to go to prison for the rest of their life. And then they will kill themselves. And so it is oftentimes that the domestic violence victims are in the most danger in the first 30 days after they've actually separated than when they are actually still in the home. Yeah. And so that is unfortunate, but that is what we've seen.
And that's why those safe houses and whatnot are so important, so that they don't know where you are. They can't find you.
Correct.
As long as you don't tell them.
Correct. And that's true. And it can be hard. It's hard to break out of these relationships. Yes. And one thing I would say is that if you are a victim of domestic violence, you should go and try to get, whether it's these counseling sessions with these groups, Harbor, Interact, Safe House, or even individual counseling yourself, to work on gaining more self-confidence, recognizing that you do have value and that what you're being told is not true. Mm-hmm. Because what is happening in these situations is the perpetrators do not believe that they are worthy of being in a relationship with the victims. And so they are verbally victimizing these people and physically victimizing them to try to bring down the self-esteem and the self-worth of the victim to where they see themselves, so then they won't leave. And the sad part is the perpetrators are often pretty good people that have issues that could be fixed. And so the perpetrator sees themselves as here, and they see the victim as here. And so they do the domestic violence so that everybody will be even and not leave. And so this person will not leave. Mm-hmm. And it's just not necessary, but that's the way they see it.
Instead of building themselves up, they try to bring the other person.
Correct. And that's just really unfortunate situation. But there is a part of all of the victims of domestic violence that at some level in their subconscious believe what they're being told. And that probably goes back to their childhood. Yes. And you have to learn more positive self-talk and how to say, no, I'm not a dog. I have value. My God loves me. My friends love me. My family loves me. I am worth something, because that's how you counteract the negative that is coming from the perpetrator telling you that you're none of these things. Yep. And that's really the most important part.
And counseling can absolutely help you break that,
Correct.
that thought pattern and that
Correct.
behavior pattern for
Correct.
sure. All right, last question. How can a family law attorney help in cases of domestic violence?
A family law attorney can do a lot of things in helps domestic violence. They can represent you in a 50B hearing, whether you are the person seeking a 50B or you are the person that the 50B is against. So either in prosecuting the restraining order or defending the restraining order. They can help you get to some of these community resources. We work with all of these community resources every week. We have personal contacts there friends at all of these places. We can get you into those resources as well. We can also help represent you in regular domestic court in custody, child support, property distribution, so that you can get separated from this perpetrator and have your financially be able to live your new life on your own. And we can also represent anybody that's been accused of domestic violence who may have actually done it and not ended up completely broken, bankrupt, having to live under a bridge in a cardboard box because all their money got taken away. And we can help them still be able to maintain access to their children. And we can help these people who may have made a mistake get the resources they need so they don't make future mistakes.
I'll still be a contributing member of society, contribute to your family.
Correct. And we can also, in some situations, defend you in criminal court as well to try to make sure that you keep your freedom. Yeah. So all of these things are important. So family law attorneys can help all people that are involved in this be better. And that's what we're all trying to do. Every single one of us is trying to help our clients be better people so that they can be the hero of their life story.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it.
All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this special edition of the Best of Johnston County podcast that we call Ask Jonathan Breeden Anything. If you've enjoyed this podcast or this is your first time listening, please do us the favor of liking, subscribing, or following this podcast wherever you are seeing it on YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TikTok, Instagram. We have this podcast everywhere so that you'll be made aware of future episodes of the Best of Johnston County podcast. The Best of Johnston County podcast comes out every Monday and has a lot of interesting guests from the Johnston County community, from community leaders to community volunteers to elected officials to people with the Johnston County schools. Be free to listen to all of those, whether it be Scott Riley, the Cleveland High School football coach, Brian Jones, the Triple S band director, Adrian O'Neill, the County Parks and Rec director. We've had a lot of great guests over the first episodes of the Best of Johnston County podcast. I guarantee you that you will learn something about your county and that you will learn to love Johnston County even more than you already do and as much as I do by listening to this podcast, because that's what we're trying to do. Till next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Breeden.
That's the end of today's episode of Best of Johnston County, a show brought to you by the trusted team at Breeden Law Office. We thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to sharing more interesting facets of this community next week. Every story, every viewpoint adds another thread to the rich tapestry of Johnston County. If the legal aspects highlighted raise some questions, help is just around the corner at www.breedenfirm.com.